Bienvenidos to Girls Rising, making mental health a priority for Latina girls and young women. My name is Monica Incavet, and I am the Director of Programs and Partnership at the Steve Fund. I am so proud that the Steve Fund has chosen to kick off this Girls Rising series with a focus on Latinas and Latinxes. Growing up in New York City as a Latina, I faced a lot of stereotypes about my Colombian culture, and it was my Latino community that gave me a sense of pride and helped my well-being and mental health. So one of the things that I love about this session today is that we could come together and know that we have a strong community that we could lean on. Before we get started, I want to share a little bit about the Steve Fund. The Steve Fund is a national organization dedicated to the mental health and emotional well-being of young people of color. Our vision is that every young person of color is supported by programs and services that value and promote their mental health and emotional well-being. So thank you for joining us today to help us make that vision a reality. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Hashtag the Steve Fund, hashtag mental health, hashtag Girls Rising. I want to take this opportunity to thank some of our sponsors that support the Steve Fund and believe in the importance of the mental health of young people. The William R. Kenyon Jr. Charitable Trust, the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation, Morgan Stanley, and Peloton. As you know, the first 25 people who registered and complete the survey at the end of the session will receive a 2-year subscription to Peloton app. And I am happy to say that we have with us today one of the amazing instructors from Peloton to help us kick off this great session on Latinas mental health, Mariana Fernandez. So I'm turning it over to Mariana to say a few words.
Hola, hola, everyone. Hi, thank you so much for having me here tonight. And I can't begin to describe how special it is for me to be involved with the Steve Fund, and especially encouraging us to all take care of our mental health. When Peloton first approached me and told me about working with the Steve Fund, it really meant a lot, because for a long time I've been attempting to not only destigmatize everything that comes along with mental health, but also empower us as Latinas to be able to have resources and access to any kind of help and guidance. So I am so happy to be here with you tonight, and thank you to the Steve Fund for having me. I grew up in Mexico, born and raised in Mexico, and then in California. And it was interesting to see how little was talked about and little was discussed, and the importance of our mental health. I had been an athlete my whole life and knew how to take care of my body in so many ways. But in being in college and graduate school, I noticed that my mental health was struggling. So it has now become my mission, not just as a Peloton instructor, but overall, to bring light to the importance of taking care of our minds, our souls. And now I get to do it through a platform like Peloton, where I teach yoga in English and in Spanish, but I have also been able to bring meditation in both languages to the platform as well. So I'm excited for you to have this opportunity to register, sign up. Anybody who attends this event you can redeem a 2-year long subscription to the Peloton app. That's going to include not just access to some yoga, but also to all of our modalities, and can maybe even serve as a stepping stone to learn about meditation, to start taking care of your mental health, whether it's through the physical realm or through meditation as well. It's so good to be here tonight. Thank you again to this incredible organization. And I hope to see all of you on the leaderboard very soon.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for your inspiring words. We are very appreciative of our partnership with Peloton, and thank you for joining us today. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Adriana Alejandre, our featured speaker. Adriana is a recognized trauma psychotherapist with a clinical practice in Los Angeles. She is the founder of the Latinx Therapy Network and the Latinx Podcast, an award-winning weekly broadcast that discusses mental health topics related to Latinas, Latinos, and Latinx individuals. Her mission is to create spaces to spark dialogue about mental health struggles and challenges that affect the Latinx community. We are so fortunate to have Adriana with us today, so let us welcome her to our virtual stage.
Thank you so much to the Steve Fund and Monica for your introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you as well for being here and giving yourself this time to learn more about how to prioritize your mental health. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so that you can see what I have prepared for all of you. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about making mental health a priority for Latina girls and young women. Now, before I get started, I'd like to give a land acknowledgement. And so I reside in the Tongva land, the land of the Gabrielino and the Tongva people who actually continue to live on this land. And you can find out more about your land at native-land.ca. All right, so as you heard, my full name, full disclosure, is Adriana Alejandre. And I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of California. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I graduated from UC Santa Barbara in 2012 and from Pepperdine with my master's degree in 2015. I am currently a group practice owner, a therapist and supervisor specializing in trauma, anxiety, dissociation among adults ages 18 and up, though I've worked with preteens and teens as well in my training, and I run many groups. I am trained in a therapy approach that we'll talk about when we do our first exercise called EMDR, and I'm also a consultant for this. And I'll share with you all that EMDR, it's an acronym. The full name of it is eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And it uses left and right movement to help the brain heal through whatever it is that you've chosen to heal from with your therapist. It's a very wonderful approach that I recommend. I founded a national organization called Latinx Therapy, as you heard, in 2018. And within there, you can find the bilingual podcast and the directory to find a therapist nationwide. I'm also a proud wife and mom. My son is 12 and a half, and I am a daughter of immigrants. And I share with you all some images of myself because as I do this work, and every single year there is new inner child work that we do. So soy guatemalteca y mexicana. I'm from Guatemala. My mom is from Guatemala and my father is from Mexico. I am someone with ADHD, anxiety, and traumas, and I identify as first generation. So I present to you my first question to all of you watching here tonight. And that is, what generation do you identify with? So first generation, second generation, third, fourth, or beyond. So all this material really can apply to everybody here. I'm going to be speaking from my experience as a first generation daughter of immigrants and how mental health is incorporated as first gen. But first, let's get an understanding as to what is mental health. And so mental health is the balance and well-being among these elements that are in our daily lives. One, that is our psychological health. So the way that we think, emotional health, the way that we feel about experiences, about the world and ourselves, our spiritual health. And this spiritual health, it can be religious and it doesn't have to be religious. It is very subjective depending on the way that you feel about elements in your life. Your physical health. So, we typically normalize and prioritize our physical health, right? When we have a cough, we may help ourselves with cough drops or cough syrup. Even maybe when we're physically ill, we go to the doctor, right? When we have pain somewhere in our body or a scrape, that's tending to our physical health, our body. And then our social health, which is interacting with community, interacting with friends, having that social life. So mental health is the balance of these elements. And when there is an element among these in your season that maybe you can't prioritize, or you haven't been able to, or there are factors in this element that are interfering, then you're going to feel an imbalance, and your mental health may suffer at that point. So if there is a balance, you're among these elements, you're experiencing good mental health. And if there is an imbalance, depending on what's going on in your world, you may be heading towards experiencing poor mental health. All right, and I'd like to share with you all some numbers here. So 1/2 of all chronic mental illnesses begin by the age of 14 years young. So that is a big statistic, and I've seen it be consistent across various different surveys that they've done. So let's read that again. 1/2 of all chronic mental illnesses begin by the age of 14 years young. 75% of mental illnesses begin by the age of 24. 22% of Latinx youth have depressive symptoms. That is higher than any group besides Native American youth. Native American youth report even higher than 22% of depressive symptoms. Young people who identify as LGBTQ+ have higher rates of suicidal thoughts and behavior. And these are statistics from the World Health Organization, Salud America, and the CDC. So let's go into our first collective exercise. It's called the butterfly hug, and it comes from EMDR. At least that's where it was taught for me. EMDR is an 8-phase protocol, as I mentioned earlier about it, and it uses that left and right movement. So what you're going to go ahead and do is cross your arms and place your hands, your fingertips, on somewhere on your body that feels safe for you, that feels like you can feel nurtured, soothed, comfortable. So for me, I like for my fingertips to be on the outer side of my arms. That's where I have sensation and I just feel comforted there. For some of my clients, it's right in front of their shoulders, on top of their shoulders, or on right by their clavicle, so on their chest. You get to choose where. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to tap one hand at a time. Make sure your finger tips touch your arm. Tap, 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 tap. All right, you all got this. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is you're going to focus on the tapping while slowing your breath. So go ahead and look down or close your eyes, whatever feels safe for you. And we're just going to tap, tap, breathe as you're tapping. Exhale. All right, so this is just a sample of the butterfly hug, and you can go ahead and give yourself a hug. And this butterfly hug is called a resource. It's an emotional resource that allows us to feel comforted, to feel soothed, to feel, it's essentially a coping skill that helps our nervous system. So you can practice this, and I do recommend for you to work on your breathing to lower, maybe if you felt tension on your shoulders, to lower your shoulders a bit as you're tapping. You can go ahead and engage in this throughout the presentation when you feel like you need it. So in order for us to discuss how we're going to prioritize our mental health, we have to talk about why mental health culturally and also historically, why it hasn't been prioritized. And that has to do with cultural factors that directly have impacted our mental health. And one of them being Marianismo and machismo. And Marianismo refers to the set of beliefs within our culture that a set of beliefs towards women, what a woman should behave like, should think like, should be like, how she should sound. And typically that is that a woman in our culture should be self-sacrificial, should, regardless of what she wants, she should do anything to keep the family together, to just always self-sacrifice, even when she's tired. This is where, many of you, such as myself, may have grown in households where it was taught that we have to serve the boys or the men first before we serve ourselves food, or we have to do something right for others before we can tend to ourselves, where women are supposed to be cleaning, or even little girls, right? That starts from a very, very young age. Machismo, similarly, but also different, is patriarchal as well. And it's what the role of the man should look like. And that a man it's normal for men to assert dominance. It's normal for men to, repress their emotions, to not show emotions. Only anger is acceptable in men, to not talk about them, right? And so Marianismo and machismo really, really teach us and condition us truly to not focus on our mental health, because we have to think of others, or we have to think of putting this front that we're okay. It's okay to not be okay, right? We just have to kind of swallow that and keep going. And these are ultimately survival mechanisms that are also rooted in trauma. They lead to more trauma, essentially, when they're repeated in our families. And that's why there's something called, that we'll talk about in the next slide, intergenerational trauma, where the trauma is passed from generation to generation to generation because of these learned behaviors. And we don't talk about them, again, because there's other issues, right? We're just supposed to keep going. There's something called parentification. And parentification refers to roles that are not developmentally or even emotionally appropriate for a child at their given age. So, for example, when I think of my mother's life, and I think about how she used to share with me that from a very young age 5, 6, if she didn't wash the dishes well, she would get into a lot of trouble. She was expected to do so much from a very young age, like many of our parents and or grandparents, and even maybe some of you in the audience, that wasn't appropriate for you to do at that age. So there's this parentification. It's not always rooted in abuse. Sometimes, for example, there could be medical issues in the family, and the child may take it upon themselves to be the helper, or to bring peace, right, to arguments, perhaps. And so if it isn't corrected by the adults, letting the child know, hey, that is our job, in order for us to take care of you, setting those boundaries that the child needs, then the set of responsibilities that the child feels that they can tolerate just continues to increase year after year, age after age, essentially. Family dynamics, where maybe we grow up in some households that they minimize your experience, or maybe when you start talking about mental health, we hear often like, well, I went through worse. And then they start talking about their story. And there's so many experiences, I think, in many marginalized communities, families where this happens, where we start talking about those, our emotions, what's going on, how something at work or at school impacted us. And then it's like, well, at your age, I was already doing X, Y, and Z, right? And so then you feel minimized, then you feel dismissed and invalidated, like what you're feeling is wrong. And so this invalidation can look differently, but this is what I meant in terms of cultural factors, this family dynamics, this sense of like comparing your story to theirs, or even your story to someone else, is something, unfortunately, that happens quite often in our families and does impact our mental health, because then you'll be less discouraged to share about it and not prioritize your mental health. So I'm going to go ahead and post another poll, and this is about family factors that normalize survival mode. And I'd like you to share all that apply. So we'll give this a moment. So these are family factors that normalize survival mode. That can be being the oldest in the family. You may experience that sense of parentification where you have to take care of, or perhaps you don't have the choice to take care of your younger siblings. It's automatic for you, or it's something that, again, you don't have that choice. Needing to be the loudest to get attention. When I teach my workshop on boundaries, a lot of times people share with me, I just feel like because my family's so loud, I have to be even louder in order for my voice to be heard. And then that gets normalized. So it's a very chaotic type of way to get attention because you need it. Being praised for being obedient. This is something that I actually experienced from a very young age. And it was honestly because I was such an anxious child and scared of kind of everything, the world. And I presented as being very obedient. I would listen to my family, to my parents, to my teachers, right? And that's because if I didn't listen to some sort of authority figure, then I was taught that there would be a negative consequence to that, right? If you don't listen to your teachers, you're going to get bad grades. Or if you don't listen to X, this is going to happen to the family, right? So when others would say, oh, you know, she's such a quiet girl, you behave so well. There's this way that people get conditioned for what's meant to be or supposedly a compliment into now a character trait, and you validate that that's how you should behave. So that's your new identity going forward. Putting others first and yourself last. Like I mentioned, pretending to be okay when you're not okay, and being told not to air dirty laundry, referring to we keep secrets in the family. Any problems you have, we don't solve them maybe with the legal system. We solve them entre familia, within the family. You know, my goal for everybody listening today is to help you and give you the skills so that you can prioritize when you're not okay, how to help yourself in these factors. So these are some of the things that we have to be aware of, reflect more about in order to see where our emotions are and the stigmas maybe that we are having and repeating, as I have, are coming from, to be able to help ourselves. So now we talked about the cultural factors, and we're going to talk about historical factors that impact our mental health. And so that could be systemic injustices that have happened to our communities, our Black, Brown, Indigenous communities. There's been a history of reasons within the medical model, within the social work models that are tied to the medical models, as to why our communities haven't been able to trust the systems, right? The legal system as well. And so I always give space to validate that. And, you know, I think historically there's been definitely lack of accessibility to providers that look like us, and why it's so important for you know, people to enter into these spaces where there is an imbalance in injustices, so that we can also represent and help our community. And that's one of the reasons why I also became a therapist. But systemic injustices are always correlated to our mental health. As I mentioned previously, intergenerational trauma, which is when trauma is passed from generation to generation, either directly it's experienced or indirectly, in the sense that it's a learned behavior. And that can be directly as well. But because of something that has happened, you know, generations ago, it's very much possible for that experience in history to impact you today. And there's research that shows also that historical traumas can alter the DNA and impact, you know, the younger generations, the younger lineage, the present lineages. So I find that research to be very fascinating, especially as someone that specializes in trauma. because there are some clients that come in not knowing, where is this coming from? I don't know. And so when we look at the family tree and the history of traumas that have happened, sometimes we can make that connection and understand why there are certain fears happening. And then the stigma exists again because there hasn't been access to the providers that look like you, that speak our language. My family speaks Spanish. And so in the 90s growing up, there really weren't that many therapists or providers really that spoke Spanish. I had to be the translator. And that's also another example actually of parentification, needing to be the child in the family that translated material, legal material, or very important emails, right, to our parents. But it needed to get done because otherwise, the school or the doctors would make the decisions for our families. So stigma runs really heavy as well. All of those other statements you heard in the poll, putting yourself last, not airing dirty laundry, all of that ties into stigma when we hear those statements. And we're gonna hear about more in the next slide. So continuing on with historical stigmas and barriers, at cultural competence, at cultural humility and language accessibility. What I mean by this is having providers that understand our communities, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, our families. For example, when we, specifically talking about my cultural background as a Latina, when people in my community experience a loss to death, where we lose someone, it is very common for us to hear their voice or to see a butterfly or something symbolic in our environment and connect it to them, or even to see, it could be like their spirit. It does not mean that we are, as other people may say, going crazy, right? Having a provider that understands this wouldn't misdiagnose you as maybe experiencing schizophrenia or having delusions or things like that. When we tell, our culture is also very body-based. When we tell our providers, especially after loss, like my heart is just hurting. And if they don't understand that our mental health experiences are expressed from our bodies, very mental health wise, they may assume it's something connected to perhaps like a heart attack, but that, me duele el corazón, it can be very much emotional, right? My heart is hurting in the sense that I just lost someone and it's sad. So those two examples I give you in regards to cultural competence and its importance, and language accessibility, having people that speak our language, and not only people, but information, right? That's why I think a lot of our families really watch these Spanish stations because it speaks to them directly. Lack of information and not understanding about mental health. I know that there's much more information now about mental health compared to when I was growing up, but we still need more information, especially more information translated. And then there's also privacy concerns, historical stigmas and barriers in the sense that sometimes many of us live in multi-generational households. And what that means is that there's many different, like it could be our grandparents, our parents, our siblings and their kids and us, right, living in one home. And so a barrier could look like not having the space to even have therapy in a confidential space in your home. There's also historically lack of health insurance and service accessibility. We know that many of our community members, including, my mom, didn't have access to citizenship. It was very difficult, and therefore she couldn't have access to the medical system for a long time, unless it's an emergency, right? But I think that I know that there's a program and for the children, and even if they do have access, many families don't feel like they can go through this Affordable Care Act because they don't trust the system. So there's fear from the legal status, as I'm talking about. And I would say that a historical stigma also connects with how within this medical model, right, that many therapists are trained in, we are trained in a way where we have to practice utilizing science, and where I understand that that's okay. I think culturally it's also important that our providers accept natural medicine and home remedies, ancestral interventions to be integrated, and that doesn't make them less than a scientific method, right? So this is more of what stigma can sound like within our families. Ponte a limpiar y se te quita lo triste. It means start cleaning or go clean and your sadness will go away. Okay. You should be over that by now. When we start sharing about something, it's like, oh, I thought you were over that, like, or you really should be over that by now. It happened yesterday, or it happened last week, that happened 1 year ago. But our mental health and emotions, again, are so subjective, and they're not, if we don't process them, if we don't talk about them, then they continue to live with us for a long time. And that's absolutely normal, actually. Just pray and it'll go away, right? There's a big religious component connected to mental health in our communities. And I feel like there could be a duality to both, where both religion and therapy can coexist. They're both okay to utilize if you choose. But sometimes we do grow up in households where it's expected to only pray and expect that that's how our depression or anxiety, anything we're experiencing, will go away. People are sharing that they heard that, especially on weekend mornings. And let me know if this is correct or not, but maybe that's because on weekends, right, that's when everybody's kind of home, unless they're getting ready to go to work and whatnot. Monday through Friday is when we go to school. All right, let's go to the next one. You're too young to feel blank. You're too young to feel depressed. You're too young to feel anxiety. You're too young to be, experiencing grief, or whatever it is. We hear that so often, where age is supposed to be some sort of invisible protector for these mental health concerns and challenges, or it's expected that children shouldn't experience any stress because they're children. They don't have bills. They have food and el techo, a roof, right? Shelter to protect them, and they should be good to go. But there's more to our mental health than just food and shelter. Those are important components too, but there's that emotional safety, right? That space that we need. And we're often taught that crying is for the weak. That if you cry, you're showing signs of weakness. And oftentimes it's because people are uncomfortable with someone else crying. People don't know how to support someone that's crying. And I like to teach that, when let's pretend you're in a test, or you're at work, wherever you're at, you're in a group of people, and you really, really have the need to cough. And, it's one of those coughs where maybe you're trying to swallow it and you're like, oh, I'm not going to cough right here. That's going to be too embarrassing. Well, what's your body going to do? Eventually, there's no way you're going to be able to swallow one of those itchy coughs where it's like you really need it to come out. It's going to come out, and it's probably going to come out yuckier, where it's like, right? And loud. It's a normal body response to need to get things out. Crying is a normal body response where we just need to relieve, our emotions. It's the same thing as coughing. It just looks differently. What others have you heard about in regards to mental health? So were you told something in regards to religion, maybe, or let's go back to the other screen. Okay. Or maybe about going out in order for you to not be sad anymore, or doing something else, right? What else have you experienced? To be strong. Thank you so much. Yes, we're also taught that being strong looks a certain way. How? By not crying, by holding your emotions, any grievances, right? And just kind of swallowing that, putting a front. We also hear ¿qué dirán? The what will they say? What will they say if you're going to therapy? What would other people say? Or what are you going to talk about? You could talk to me about therapy, like, or whatever your emotions. You don't need to pay someone. That's also something else. But being able to go to therapy provides you that space that friends and family cannot give us. It is confidential. Let's talk about what are some red flags for our mental health. Okay, so I want to say I'm very proud of this brain I drew. So yes, illustrated by me, but red flags. So these are some of the main red flags. There are many more, but these are some of the big ones that as mental health professionals we are looking for in the first appointment, for a second appointment when we're doing evaluations. And it's concentration problems, especially in youth when you're going to school for many hours of the day typically, and you're noticing that there's a difference in your concentration problems either at school or at home. That can be a red flag. And for any of these, keep in mind that these have to be different than your normal self, okay? And they're not comparable to anyone else. So your concentration problems can't be comparable to your friends, for example. When we're having sleep issues, there can be a regression of sleep. So maybe you are sleeping a lot more. That can be an indication of depression, or you're sleeping a lot less. That can be an indication perhaps of anxiety. Excessive fears and worries. Maybe this wasn't something that you've experienced before, but suddenly now you're having trouble sleeping because you're experiencing a lot of worries. You're worried maybe about something going on in your family, in your personal life, like your social life, right? Or even your health. Maybe you're noticing changes in your body and it's starting to worry you. So these, I would say, are red flags again for imbalancing your mental health. Isolating yourself. Perhaps you've been a social person, and that can vary, right? But again, you're now doing less of what you've enjoyed doing. You're hanging out less with the people that you typically have enjoyed hanging out with. So you're isolating yourself less. And you notice maybe that you're getting curious, or you're beginning to use substances to cope. Substances referring to alcohol, drugs. And lastly, increase in irritability, especially in youth. Depression often comes up as irritability, not crying. It can include crying, but oftentimes we notice it in youth as increased irritability, where you're just, a lot of teens report that they don't even know what the parents said, that their parents said nothing wrong, but that they just feel irritable. They just feel bothered all the time inside. And that's normal. Normal when there are mental health concerns such as depression. And so when we start talking about it, it starts to decrease, and you start to gain a more sense of understanding of yourself and your emotions. And then your internal dialogue. So the way that you are thinking about things is, I can take it. I should be grateful because it could be worse. Again, these are red flags where if you are starting or you have some of these, it's an indication that you're tolerating a lot, okay? My work determines my value. So I got to do more in order for me to prove that I am worthy. I'm responsible for making my blank happy. Teacher, parent, sibling, right? We're seeing that theme of putting others first before yourself. Right here, I should be grateful because it could be worse. You're using that theme of comparison. You're comparing your situation that isn't making you feel very good to minimize it and justify that someone else has a worse experience than what you do. Other beliefs. You believe that your worth is defined by how much you work, how much you do. And this can be academically, this can be with friends. Sometimes you feel like you have to overcompensate, you have to give more than what you're receiving. You're neglecting your self-care. You're extremely hard on yourself over minor mistakes that can be, again, in school or driving perhaps, and you're just being really, really mean and harsh to yourself. And again, these come from la cultura. They can be microaggressions within our society's belief that value is tied to productivity, that we got to keep doing, keep going. And that's something that we have to change. We have to understand that rest is as equally important here, especially when you're doing so much. Our lineage, our families have, especially as children of immigrants, right, have been working so much. And a lot of them, like my parents, came here in order for us to have a life that doesn't require working as much as they did. And so we have to learn to find that balance between, yes, being a productive citizen, however you choose, but also allowing yourself to rest and not seeing it as you're just huevona, right? Huevon, as just being lazy. They are both very much important. Okay, so we're going to learn about some techniques for long-term mental health care. Okay, one is to find individual therapy or support group. If you are a minor, there is a lot of support, especially in states, border states such as California, Texas, Florida. Those are very populated states where there are usually more services and they are free. Here in California, there are quite a few that offer free services. Usually they do have a wait list, but you want to look for nonprofit mental health. And there's different ages as to when you can give consent as well. So for example, in California, it's ages 11 and up. You don't need a parent's consent for your own therapy. So, it's important to, we'll talk about how to bring it up to your family, but, should you want to talk to a provider, see how you can maybe get that support, it's important to have this information as well. To learn how to make your positive internal voice stronger by practicing. So if you have some of those beliefs that I mentioned in the other screen, I can take this, I should prioritize others, or I'm responsible for making these people happy, right? Okay, so how can you also integrate talking to yourself in a positive way for yourself? So I deserve rest. I am worthy of taking a break. I'm capable of achieving this and also of believing in myself, right? So mixing in those messages and then making sure that we are affirming, we are validating ourselves. My emotions are important, even if I don't have a parent that can hear them right now. Recognize that feeling guilty about saying no, right? Setting boundaries can stem from people pleasing. That was something I struggled with for such a long time, where I didn't want to say no. I didn't want to set boundaries because I thought that I didn't want to be seen as a mean person, as a bad person. And so instead, I was people pleasing without knowing. And so being able to learn how to set boundaries, and I'll give you all some language and techniques as to how we can go about that, can benefit you so that you have more energy and capacity for yourself. Reach out for help. Ask and be willing to receive. So sometimes we ask for help and then we say, oh, no, that's okay. I got it. Right? So it's very much also important to allow others to help you, especially when you've asked for help or when they're offering help. Another thing for long-term mental health care is to mix up your social media feed and take breaks. Feel free to unfollow people that are making you feel unhealthy. Perhaps they're making you feel bad about yourself, or their content is giving you a little bit anxiety. For a lot of youth that I was working with before, they were sharing that political stuff kept making them feel a little anxious and nervous. So it's okay to give yourself permission to unfollow. And now I know that some social media sites have like a mute option, but it's important to also, I know that many of us have our real world and then our digital worlds. Both need boundaries. Setting boundaries around your schedules based on your energy level. So what I mean by this, for example, is for a lot of people, Mondays are really difficult because it's after the weekend. And so you may have a Monday morning that's a little bit more, or it has less energy. You can't give as much as you usually do energy wise. But let's say come Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, you may wake up typically with more energy. It's just easier to get your day going. It's really important to know what days of the week do you tend to have more energy than others, so that you can also set boundaries and mix your schedule around your energy levels. Using I statements on the next slide to ask for help or express yourself. So I'm going to teach you all some assertive communication here. And these are I statements. If you don't know feeling words, like such as, we know the basics, right? Mad, sad, happy, scared, nervous. But if you want to expand and learn about more, I recommend the resource feelingswheel.org. It may be .com, but feelingswheel.com, they have a version in English and in Spanish. And it's very colorful and it has many different emotions. And basically, you can use that to insert in these examples that I'll give you. So let's use this I statements. I statements is helpful, especially because we come from many households where there's you statements. Tú no hiciste esto, tú te crees esto, right? A lot of tú, a lot of you didn't do this. You have to do that. A lot of doing, right? So we can say, I feel frustrated when the situation, when I'm unheard. What I need is for you to give me eye contact when I am sharing my feelings, right? Or perhaps if you hear like something about a chore, you didn't clean the dishes. It would just sound so much different, and I think be received different if it was communicated in this way. I feel irritated when the dishes aren't washed on your days. What I need is for you to wash the dishes when you say you would, right? So that just has a different ring than the you starting your sentences with you. You can use this with your teachers as well, or you can ask for help saying, I am seeking help with assignment number blank. What I don't understand is this part, right? There's a sandwich effect. So this one can be in 3 or 2 sentences. And this one is mostly for when we're having a difficult conversation with someone, or maybe we'd like to request something and we're feeling a little nervous from them. So you want to begin with a positive or neutral thing about the person or the event. I have really appreciated being in your class. You want to state the request, boundary, or need. Or you know what, actually, let me backtrack, because someone shared how to communicate about going to therapy to their parents. So I'm going to use this for that example. So I have, I enjoy, give me a moment, everybody, sorry. I'm trying to put myself in that position of speaking to like my parents. So I would say I am very grateful for the space that I have and being able to talk to you and to learn. I would like to request going to therapy in order for it to talk more about my feelings. You can end with something different, positive or neutral about the person. So in this case, it can, you can leave it at the sentence number 2, or you can add, this doesn't mean that I don't trust you. I want you to be involved, but I need to talk about some of my emotions, some of my stress that is going on. So obviously for this specific example, it's going to really depend on your emotional connection with your parent, because some of us maybe don't have that emotional safety, right, with our parents. But you can start by it's a matter of starting the dialogue. And for some of our families, it's not going to be a one-time conversation. Sometimes it's going to require multiple short conversations. I typically don't recommend too long of conversations because sometimes the points can just go in different directions than where you started, where you want to go. So I would recommend, just keeping it very brief. And then let's go to the third one, direct and to the point, which is what it is, what it sounds like. Are you, if someone asks you, are you able to help me with my homework? I'm unable to help you with your homework, and leaving it at that. And the reason why I include this as assertive communication training is because sometimes when we over-explain things, it's again coming from that people-pleasing mode because we don't want others to think that we're being mean. Okay. So let's engage in another exercise, and that's using your senses. So wherever you're at, I just want you to look around your space and point to 5 different things that are around you. So for me, it's my clock, my plant, my mirror, art, and my laptop. Okay. Go ahead and feel 4 different things around you that have different textures. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice 3 things you hear in this moment, whether that's my voice, AC, or office noise, wherever you're at. Just go ahead and notice 3 different sounds. Okay, and smell 2 things near you. And notice any lingering taste in your mouth. Excellent. So this is called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And this exercise often helps us from staying in our to-do list. Sometimes we're thinking so much ahead that we forget about our present environment, about where we're really at. Sometimes we're so focused on the screen. So this really grounds us and orients us just to the present. And the way I teach it to my clients is that I think of this as like a reset button. So now that you've done this, where do you want to redirect your mind, yourself to? So you can tell yourself, well, now I can try to focus again. I can maybe engage in breathing and then engage in this assignment that I'm doing right now. Okay. So how do you find mental health care? And that's another poll I want you to share. Do you know how to find a therapist? Yes or no? But I'm going to give you resources, okay? And so in terms of mental health resources, here are podcasts that I recommend, including my own. Nopal Queens is another mental health podcast by 3 Latina therapists. Therapy for Black Girls is by Dr. Joy. She's wonderful. And The Homecoming by Dr. Tama. Here are some free support groups. I give you their websites and they are national, that you can search. Low-cost mental health support. So we run groups on latinxtherapy.club, and then openpathcollective.org offers sliding scale. You can only see therapists in the state that you live in. So keep that in mind. And here are 3 directories, including mine. And then Immigrants Rising has a mental health match connector. It is a free program where they offer undocumented folks free therapy, and they match you with your provider. And here are some questions I recommend to ask a therapist during a consultation call. So during the consultation call, when you find a therapist that's a fit, whether that's through your insurance or through a directory or referred by someone else, regardless from where, I would like for you all to get comfortable with asking some or all of these questions. How is my progress determined? Do you accept my insurance? And be specific on which one, right? If you have that. How do you practice social justice and anti-racism work, or whatever is important to you? What's your opinion on blank? Maybe some thoughts that you've been having, right? How do you treat blank? The reason for seeking therapies. How do you treat depression? How do you treat, if you're 18, how do you treat 18-year-olds that are experiencing relationship issues or identity concerns? All right. some more. Here are books. This one is on boundaries. Very, very excellent book for brown girls with sharp edges and tender hearts. My amiga Prisca is very intelligent and writes from many different perspectives, including, patriarchy and how that impacts mental health. And there's many different themes in there that are relatable to many of us. You Sound Like a White Girl by Julissa Arce is also something that maybe some of us, I definitely have experience growing up as a child in being able in trying to assimilate. And my parents also wanted us to assimilate as a method to survive. The Homecoming is great for, like it says here, overcoming fear and trauma. And I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. Here are some therapy funds. You will all have this slide, and you can find a therapist using our directory. All right, everyone, thank you so much. And again, thank you to the Steve Fund.
Gracias, Adriana. So informative and such great resources. Thank you for taking time to share your experience and for being vulnerable. I related to so many situations that you shared today. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know our audience is walking away with great ideas on how to support their mental health. And to the participants, thank you for taking time to join us today and being a part of this community. Please take the time to complete the survey that we are dropping in the chat. And also check us out on social media for more programs and resources to support the mental health of your mental health and mental health of young people. Also, just one of our resources to add to the ones that Adriana shared, text Steve to 741-741 to speak to a Spanish-speaking counselor. And on behalf of the team at the Steve Fund, we thank you for joining us today. And thank you again, Adriana. Complete the survey, and remember, the first 25 to complete the survey will receive a 2-year app to Peloton classes, which includes yoga and meditation, like Mariana Fernandez, who you met today. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you at the next Girls Rising event. Take care.